Hello and welcome. This is Jennifer McGuire. Lately, stencils have been very popular and there's some really cool designs out there. But I know some people are intimidated by stencils because they think the techniques have to be really messy. But I wanted to show you that there's a very clean way that you can use stencils, a very simple way, and it's by layering ink. And it's probably with inks that you already have. So here are some of the cards that I've made, and I'm going to show you how to do these today. They're very simple and a great way to use up some solid cardstock scraps that you might have to create some really cool backgrounds. I made 6 cards and they all use new Hero Arts background stencils and also some fun products from Ellen Hudson. Okay, so I've picked 6 pieces of cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I think this technique works best with vibrant or dark colors of cardstock, so you can pick any that you have in your stash. I'm going to start by using this green example. I have a triangle stencil from Hero Arts. This is a new one. And I have my green piece of cardstock. I have micropore tape, which is just a great tape to use for crafting, but you could use washi tape or any kind of tape that you may have. And I'm going to tape the cardstock to the back of the stencil, just to hold it in place. Now I'm using Hero Arts Unicorn White Pigment Ink and a little sponge dauber to pounce the ink over the stencil. If you don't have a sponge dauber, you could even use your fingers for this or a makeup applicator. Now, Hero Arts Unicorn White Pigment Ink is by far my favorite white ink. It's very vibrant when you put it on dark colors. However, it is a pigment ink, and so it stays wet for a little bit. It kind of sits on top of the paper and stays wet, which is great because you can heat emboss it. But today, I don't plan to heat emboss, so I'm going to need to heat set this. Now look how pretty that is, that white ink against the green background. You can make it a soft white by putting less white ink on, or make it even more vibrant by putting more on. But I want to be careful not to touch this until we have heat set it. Now I could stop here and just leave that great white pattern, but what I'm going to do is kind of create like this shadow dimension effect by putting the stencil on once again, but with a different color of ink. So you see how those triangles are kind of white and green, kind of offset a little bit? That's what we're going to do here today. I've done this before with stamping, and I will link to a video where I've done that technique, but I wanted to show you how you could do it with stencils. Okay, so I'm taking the stencil, I'm lining it up with the original pattern, and then I'm going to slightly move it, so offset it slightly. See how I've kind of scooted it over a little bit? Now I'm going to press that down onto the tape, and now we're going to put another ink on top of this. Now you can use here any dye ink. So any dye ink that you may have. I'm using Hero Arts Green Hills Shadow Ink. I love this color, it's so pretty. And I have a new sponge dauber that isn't the white one because I don't want to get white ink on my green ink pad. And I'm going to pounce this color over it. Now these sponge daubers you can save and reuse many times in the future. I just assign one per color. Now when I take this off, you'll see that where the green ink was on top of the white, you get like a light green. And then where the green goes directly onto the green paper, you get a dark green. So it looks like you used a few different colors of ink, but really you only use 2. This technique really gives a fun dimensional look to it. It kind of looks like those white triangles are popped up. But really all you did was use 2 inks slightly offset with the same stencil. I'm going to show you another example. This one I changed the pattern quite a bit between the white and the blue inks. So I have another new stencil from Hero Arts. They just released a bunch of really cool patterns. But remember, you can use this technique with any stencils that you may have. And if you don't have any stencils, you could die cut your own. I'm again using the Hero Arts Unicorn White Pigment Ink to pounce the white ink over the stencil. I like to pounce instead of kind of smear it around because then I can be sure to get a nice even coverage as opposed to some of the ink kind of pooling up in the corners of the stencil pattern. So once I have this covered, I'm going to go ahead and take this off. And it's real easy, by the way, to clean these stencils off. You just wipe it with a baby wipe or run it under the sink. Look how pretty that white is on the pool. Now I'm going to take this stencil and instead of slightly offsetting it, I'm going to offset it quite a bit to kind of create a new pattern. So it ends up looking like those circles are interlocking. So once you can kind of see through the stencil to see how your pattern's going to look. And once I have it where I want it, I'm taking Hero Arts Soft Pool ink and I'm dabbing that over it. Now I recommend using a dye ink for this step, the colored ink being a dye ink, because when the dye ink sits on top of that white pigment ink, you get a soft look. If you use a pigment ink here, a colored pigment ink, it will just cover up the white underneath it. Because remember, pigment inks sit on top of the paper, whereas dye inks absorb into it. And check out that really cool pattern that you get. Now this is a pretty busy pattern, so I'm going to make sure that I keep the rest of my card very simple. Now I am using a tone-on-tone ink for the second one, that pool on the pool cardstock, but you could use a completely different color if you want to. Now there's one more example I wanted to show you. This one's really neat. I like how I overlapped the inks more on this one, so it ends up looking like there's just touches of white. So I inked the background with the white. Now I'm putting the stencil back on it, and I'm slightly offsetting it, so you can see a little bit of that dark cardstock is showing through. And now I'm adding fresh peach ink on top of that. So you can see there's a lot of white inked area, and I'm overlapping that with the peach. So I end up with a lot of like a soft peach with just some white highlights around it. So you can change how much you offset your pattern. You can completely turn the stencil around and get a completely different pattern on top of the first. And again, you can use any stencils that you may already have. But remember, you always want to heat set this to prevent that white ink from smearing. And check out that cool look of dimension that you get. Now I did a couple other cards. I wanted to just show you a close-up look at those. Here's one where I did a lighter peach cardstock with that same fresh peach ink on top of the white. And then this pink one I think might be my favorite. I just kind of offset that and look at that cool pattern that you get. It looks like you use a bunch of ink colors, but I really only used the two. Now that we have our backgrounds completed, it's time to pull these together into cards, and I'm going to keep them simple since the backgrounds are busy. I've collected 3 different stamp sets from Ellen Hudson that have some sentiments that I love. I like this Oh Happy Day here. Then on this one, there are a lot of great sentiments, but I actually only used the little heart on this one. I love this playful little heart. I used that You Are My Favorite sentiment on a video I did the other day, which I'll link to. And then the Hello Gorgeous from this set. I just really love all of these sets. Now what I did is I die cut some white circles, and then I die cut vellum circles that were slightly larger, and I stamped the sentiments with black Hero Arts dye ink on each of those. Very basic. You could use circle dies or circle punches for this, or you could just cut them into squares. But I like having that vellum frame around them. I also decided to put some messy string behind the sentiment. This is really popular these days, and I think the first person who ever did it was Sally Trademan from Hero Arts many, many, many years ago. She used to do this in classes, and I think it's kind of fun, but I'm going to show you how I do it. So I have here a piece of white fun foam that I die cut to be the same size as that circle that we stamped our sentiment on. Now on the back of our sentiment, I'm going to put some adhesive. I put quite a bit of adhesive on the back there, and you'll see why in a moment. Now I have some silver string. I also use gold, and I'm going to fold this over 3 times. So I actually have 3 plies. So you'll see me fold it once here and then fold it once again. So that when I do this, I'm actually using 3 pieces of this thread. So I'm going to trim this off here, and again, it's folded over. You can see the 3 plies here. And I'm going to just put this into a bow, just as I would when I'm tying my shoelaces. I'm just creating a bow. It's messy. It doesn't matter. I just like to kind of control this string, and this is how I think is best. Now I'm going to pull some of the ends uneven so that all my loops are different sizes, and I'm going to keep all my strings long. We'll take care of that in a moment. So there we have a messy, uneven bow with all 3 of the strings. So now I'm going to kind of position it on my craft sheet, and then I'm going to stick my sentiment on it, and that will stick the thread to the back of it, kind of where we want it. Now I can flip it over and move my strings to kind of come out in different places, so you can kind of position them where you want. So if you're like me and you like to have a mess, but a controlled mess, this is one way to do it. So now before I stick this onto my card, I'm going to put this die cut fun foam circle behind it so that I have some dimension. You could use foam tape here if you want to. And now I'm going to glue that to my card. So now if I want to, I can move those strings around so that the ends come out wherever I want behind the circles. So again, it's messy, but kind of a controlled messy. Now I can go ahead and take my scissors and trim off the ends. Now you could do this with twine, baker's twine, ribbon, whatever you want. I really like this silver and gold thread because it's very inexpensive, and I can also use it in my sewing machine. If that fun and playful and messy look of that string isn't for you, you could just skip that and maybe stick some sequins on here for some added interest. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull these together in a card. I've cut a piece of white fun foam that is slightly smaller than our colorful backgrounds, and I'm going to adhere that between our background and my 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card so that it has some dimension. Now I did trim down my color backgrounds just a hair so that when I put it on the 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card, some of the white peeks out the side. And there you have it, a very simple card. So I created 6 of these at once. Since I had all my supplies out, I might as well do that. So there's a way you can take your stencils and create a fun faux dimensional background by layering your inking. As always, if you're interested in finding the products that I talk about today, they're linked below in my YouTube description. And you can go over to my blog at jennifermcguireink.com, where I have much more information, including some fun giveaways. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I hope you'll come back soon.